So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through one more way of creating our grading surface and all based on our design. And so this is my base design. And so I have everything set up here. I had these set up like this. I had all of these joined together and things like this. And this is how I started out. And then I went ahead and just like our Project Homework 4 Part 1, I created a reference surface off of that. So let me show you where I am with this. I'm going to come over and show you this one and just kind of show you what I have. So I had my existing ground surface and I went ahead and created a reference surface. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my existing ground. Right click on Properties, No Display, OK. And so this is my surface. For the most part, it's following that existing ground surface. I tweaked it a little bit. It's a little bit flatter in this area because I wanted it a little bit more level around where my building pad is. It's not completely level. There's a slight grade on it. And then all of these are on the normal grade for my design. And so that's kind of how mine is set up. And so I have everything set up here. One of the other things that I did was, if you remember from my previous one, if you look at this, I had these lines go all the way out and all the way out to the street. Sometimes you'll even see people that have it come all the way around here and tie into this portion of the street. But ours is going to be a little bit different because I am not going to deal with that portion. That portion is going to be all dealt with, the road and all that. And it would be a little bit more difficult for y'all to do some of the later steps if you have to tie this into an existing roadway or whatever. So we're not even going to do that. What we're going to do is, if you look, what I did was I went ahead and I cut mine off right here. So I made sure that it cut off and didn't include that portion of my road. I did the same thing up here. It's cut off at that point. Now this is really important. You want to make sure you do this yourself on your design. So it's cut off, and then I came in and I joined all these together. And this is the other imperative thing. These have got to be joined together. Otherwise, you are going to have the biggest headache trying to make these corridors if you don't do that. So this is joined, each one of these are, and then I have these little lines here, but they're not joined to anything. They were more just to help me mark where I was going to trim my roadway. And so I ended up breaking these, and that's how my design was. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take this and I'm going to project it up to, I'm going to take my lines and create feature lines and project them up to my reference surface. So I'm going to come over to feature line, create feature line from objects, and then I'm going to pick all of my little lines here, and I'll hit enter. And I'm going to put them on a new site. I'm going to call this one parking lot. And I'll hit OK. I'm going to check this box. I would suggest you do it, because what this is going to do is it's going to name each of these lines. I could do this individually, but in this case, I'm going to name mine parking feature and parking feature line 1, parking feature line 2. And by checking that box, it'll just give them each a name. This makes the next steps a lot easier. So go ahead and check that box. I'm going to just keep it at this layer, but if you want to put it in a new one, you're welcome to. I'm going to uncheck this box because I want to keep my original lines. I don't want to get rid of them. And I'm going to check this box because, of course, we're assigning the elevations based on the reference surface. So I want to check that. I'll hit OK. And then I'm going to go from surface. I'm going to go reference surface. And then I'm going to check this little box, insert intermediate grade breakpoints. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to make sure the second one's unchecked. And I'm going to hit OK. And it should have projected them all up to the surface. Occasionally it doesn't. I don't know why. I haven't found the logic for this, but sometimes even though you told it to project to the surface, it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to rotate over on the side and see if everything projected up. And in my case, it did. Everything went up and projected. If it didn't, what you can do is select your feature line, and if it's still down or part of it's down on the surface, part of it's up or whatever, if you select the feature line and then you go to this button right here, it's called Elevation from Surface, click it, select the reference surface again, hit OK, and then click on that line a second time, it'll make sure that it projects it up to the top. And you can do that for all your lines. So that is the way you can fix that. And I have that in the slides in 12.2 if you have trouble remembering how to do that. All right, so I have that. I don't need these lines anymore. I'm going to turn them off. They're called parking EOC. And so I don't need them in my design. I also don't need my reference surface. So I'm going to open that up, right click on it, surface properties, and no display. All right, so now I'm ready to go. Now we're going to make a corridor. If we're making a corridor, we have to have an assembly, and I made some assemblies already. So if I come over here, you can see my assemblies. I have one that just has a curb and daylight. That's for the outside of my property, that outside edge of the property. And then for any inside things like parking islands or a building pad that's completely inside, I made one that just has a curb. If you look at my example that I used in 12-2, I also had one more, and I'll just make it right here, and I called it Design Daylight. Let's call it Design with Sidewalk. And so this is going to be a design line. I'm going to put it right here. That is going to have the curb. So I'm going to add in my curb. I'm going to put it on this side. And then I'm going to add a little sidewalk. And I'm going to put this here. So this would be for any of the interior parking islands or whatever, or building pad that you might want a sidewalk on. And then I'd have that one. If you wanted a sidewalk on the exterior, you would do the exact same thing, except you would add a daylight to the end of it. So that's how you create those assemblies, and those are assemblies that I have. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a corridor, and we're going to start with one of the lines, and then we are going to add each of these to that corridor. So don't do it separately as separate corridors for each. We're going to add them all to the same corridor. And so, but we got to start somewhere. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go to corridor, and I'm going to create a new corridor, and let's give it a name. I'm going to call it parking lot. And a basic corridor style is great. You have really no option other than that. We're not using an alignment here. We're using feature lines. So I'm going to go to feature line. And the only rule about feature lines is they have to have a name for this to work. If you didn't check that box to create a name, you're still okay, because when you come over to select, the first thing it will ask you is, hey, this doesn't have a name, add a name, and then it'll come right back to the screen. So we'll be set. I'm going to come in, and the assembly I'm going to use, because this is outside, is going to be the one with the daylight. And then finally, because it has daylight, I have to do a target surface, and so I am going to pick existing ground. And so I'll hit OK, and OK, because it comes up with this, it rebuilds the corridor, and if you look, it rebuilds it wrong. It actually didn't rebuild it wrong, it rebuilt it right. The problem was my feature line was reversed, so it thinks that it is running along the one side of the road, and so that's why daylight and everything's in there. I actually want it to go the opposite way. So how do you fix a problem like that? You just reverse the feature line. Now the problem we have right now is, of course, getting to that feature line. If I try to select it, I get the corridor instead. The way you can fix that is just by selecting the corridor, and if you right click, there's an option here that says display order, and I'm going to say send to back. And what that'll do is it'll allow Now if I come to select, it's going to select that feature line because it's on that exact same plane. And so now I can select this, the other one's slightly behind it. And when I select that feature line and right click, there's an option that says reverse, and I reversed my feature line. Now it looks a little bit weird because it hasn't quite calculated anything yet. I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to go rebuild corridor, and it looks at it and goes, oh, okay, I know what's going on. Now this is pretty good. I don't know if I like the way it's doing the frequencies here. The way you can fix that is if you go to corridor properties and you click on parameters, there's a thing that says set all frequencies. And I normally like these right around, so set this at around 5 and this around 2.5 and hit OK. And OK, it'll rebuild. And it just gives you kind of a finer set of lines. If you don't like this, or if you want to spread out, you can, but I like the way it does the curve a little bit better, this style. So now that I have this, I'm going to add these other lines, but I'll tell you straight up, on this project, every single one of these is reversed. So so that I don't have to rebuild them each time, let me just go ahead and just reverse these right away. So I'm going to select this one, right click, go to reverse, select this one, right click, go to reverse. You can also use it on the contextual ribbon. So if I select this, this is the button that reverses. So I can click that as well and click this as well, and that will reset all those. So that's the two ways you can reverse a set of lines. So now that they're reversed, let's add them into my existing corridor. Here's how you do that. You select and you go add baseline, and then we want it to be a feature line just like we did last time. I'm going to click feature line right here. I'm going to click the green button so I can directly click on it, and I'll click this one. This one's called parking feature 2, and that's fine, so I just hit OK. And then I keep doing that to all the others. So feature line, click here, hit OK. Now, if you accidentally forget to hit feature line, so if I just hit the button here and I try select, you'll notice it doesn't select because it's looking for a alignment. So you want to make sure that you have feature line selected and then click on it and OK. And with each of these, like I said, if you forgot to add the name, when you come over and click on the green button and select it, it'll ask you to give it a name, and you can just give it a name. Hit OK, and now all those are added. Now, if you do that and rebuild corridor, nothing happens. Well, that's because we haven't told it what the assembly is going to be on this one and what the assembly is going to be on this one. And so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll select our corridor. We'll go to corridor properties. And now you'll notice here's our first one, and it has the baseline, and then it has the region set with the assembly. And we're going to create that for each of these. And it's real easy to do. If you just right click on them, it'll show you up in the thing, it'll highlight it. And then there's an option, add region. We're going to add the region. And then we pick what we want. Well, in this case, this is going to be daylight. So I'm going to hit design daylight. And I can actually do this to all the others, add region. This one's assembly design. That's the one that's just the curve. I'm going to right click on this one, add region, assembly design, just the curve. And finally, add region, assembly design, just the curve. Now, remember, this one had a daylight. So if we want it, one other thing before I do that too, you notice it, even though it didn't show the region, you get these little plus signs by it, and if you open them up, you can see that it's added the region to each of these. I'm going to come over to this one right here. It's looking for a target. So if I select it and go set target right here, this little button, for the surface, I can have that as existing ground. And so I hit OK, I hit OK, I hit rebuild corridor, and now I have my corridor based on all of those things. We have a couple bow ties that will clear up. I'll do that at another time. Right now I'm not too worried about it. I've got everything I need right here. And so now I want to make this a surface. So if you remember what to make a corridor surface, you click on the corridor, and here's the option, corridor surface. And first button I'm going to click is this one on the left to say you want to create a surface. And then we're going to add a link. The link we're going to add is called top. And so we'll set our link to top and hit the plus. And it's going to add a top surface link. And that's basically all we need. If we check the OK box right here, the add break line, just go ahead and check that. Hit OK. And we should end up with a surface. So let's see how ours looks. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go to Object Viewer. And something happened. It looks really weird. I got things all over the place. Sometimes that happens, especially with real narrow areas and all that, and it kind of freaks out. Here's how we're going to fix that. We're going to come in here, select our corridor, go back to corridor surfaces, and selecting this, so we have this selected, we're going to add a few more things to this. So not just the top, we're going to add some feature lines. So I'm going to add the back of curb. I'll add one for daylight. I'll add one for flange. I'll add one for flow line gutter. And then I'm going to add one for top of curb. There we go. And I'm going to hit OK. And sometimes you have to hit rebuild again. But let's see what this one does. So if I select it now and right click. Oh, much better. Much better. Still have a couple weird things happening over here. That's all right. That's right out at the edge. But this is a much better representation of what I need as far as my surface goes. Got a nice little surface going here. And I'm just about ready to go with my design. So what we need to do is once we have this, what we want to do is we want to create a finished surface. Finished surface is pretty easy. We're just going to come here and create a surface. So if I go to the Home tab and go to Surface, I'm going to go Create Surface, and I'm going to name this one Finished. And I can do Surface too. That makes everyone feel better. There we go. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to go ahead. Let's turn off that parking lot surface. So I'll go to Surface Properties. Just set that to No Display. So everything's cleared off here. I can come over now and I'm going to select the finished surface, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down and hit select. For some reason you have to do that if you don't have a surface with you. So now that I have that in, what I'm going to do is under Edit Surface, what we're going to be doing is pasting existing surfaces into this finished one. And the biggest rule you have to understand is start big, go small. So as the steps go on, the first thing you always want to put in is the existing ground. So I'm going to hit OK, and it puts in the existing ground. Well, this doesn't look right. It doesn't have our parking lot in here. That's okay. If I come in and go Edit Surface, Paste Surface, and pick the parking lot, it's going to add that into my thing. And you see how it changed those? Let's look and see what we ended up with here. So if I right click and go to Object Viewer, I can kick around and I can see that it's now added that into my existing surface. Now what you'll notice, sometimes you'll have some weird things happening at the exits. It's just trying to triangulate back to the existing surface, and sometimes those are big triangles, and so it throws these rogue things in. If we had tied it all the way into that road, those go away, but it's not a big deal for our design because we would actually be adding those in anyway. So I've got those. I got a little mess up here, but that was because of bow ties. For the most part, everything looks great. I'm going to do one more thing though. I am going to set my parking lot surface right here. I want to have a building pad set at that height, and so the parking lot surface site is at 356.44. So I'm going to select this. That's my building pad. I'm going to make it a feature line. And it can be in the parking lot feature line. I'm going to actually set mine to none, just in case it interferes with something. And then everything else is good. Assign elevations. I'm going to go OK. And then the elevation I'm going to set this at is 356 point, what was it, 4. And I'll hit OK. Let's make it slightly higher, so I'm just going to raise 0.5. There we go. And now that it's up at that elevation, I can select that and go add to surfaces, break line, and let's just add it to that parking lot surface and hit OK. And call this pad, hit OK. It's going to give me a couple errors, but not much. And let's see if I look at my finished surface now. Oh, hold on. Let me rebuild it. There we go. If I go over and look at this in the object viewer, I now have my building pad in there as well. You can kind of see it right here. And so that's all level and everything's set as far as that goes. Once you get the finished surface, we can come in and we can add in some of the details. And we'll do that in just a second. So I turned on a couple of the layers that I wanted for this design. And so that's part of the road. I turned back on the edge of concrete, which is really where the flange is. And there's certain lines that I really like in my design. And so one of the ones that I like is the edge of curb. I like the top of curb, and I like the daylight line, but I don't really like these frequency lines. And those are based on the links. So what I'd like to do is figure out a way to turn those off. Well, those are all code sets. And so if I come over here and I select, I'm going to go over to properties for the corridor properties. And if I look, this one is set up for all codes. If I go over, let's just change this to all codes, no display, and hit apply. That gets rid of everything, but it also gets rid of some of the lines that I like. If I do basic, and I hit apply, it's going to get rid of some of the lines like the front of curb and top of curb and back of curb, but it leaves the ones that I don't like. And so right now there's not a lot of codes that kind of fit. There's a couple kind of cool ones. One called hatching. It's actually going to hatch it based on the material. So that looks kind of cool. Same problem that I have. So how are we going to do it? Well, I really don't want to have those lines in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to all codes and let's make a new code. I like everything except for those links, and I'll show you how we're going to turn those off. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to click this little drop down and go copy current selection. I'm going to select it and I'm going to go to link right here, and I can select this first one and then just roll all the way down, hold down shift and turn all those off. And then I'm going to come here where it says style and basic, and I am going to click on this and just no display, and I'll hit OK, and that should set that for all of them. So if I hit OK, and then let's rename this. I don't really like the name. Let's call this something else. Let's call this all codes, no links. There we go. So I'm going to name it that. I'll come over and I'll hit apply. And yeah, this is much more what I like. So I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to come up. And so now I have the edge of my curb, the edge of my gutter, the back of curb. All of those are showing, and I like that a lot better. So this is the flow line gutter, and this is the top of curb, This is the back of curb and everything else. And then of course this is the edge of my daylight. And so I've got my lines more the way I like it. I can come over and now we're ready to kind of print. So let's come over. I have a layout already here. I already zeroed in my little area here. I'm set as a scale of 1 to 20. And we lock that in. And let's kind of add in some of the stuff that we want in our design. And so one of the first ones is we want to deal with the feature lines and all here, or I mean the contour lines. We want to go ahead and off of our property, we want those contour lines to actually have the elevation. So we want to do this. And so I'm going to come in, select it, go to add labels. And in this case, I've got a lot of them. So let's go to multiple. I'm going to click right here and I'm just going to shoot across here. And that's going to add a bunch of lines there. And then I'll do it again up top. And we've done this before in our other class. And so I'm going to come in and I'll just run this across here. And of course we don't want to see these lines, so I'm going to select both of these and go to properties. And I'm going to set that to false. Hit OK. All right, so everything's good there. But in here, we don't have as many lines normally. And so how do we deal with what's going on the inside, especially areas that just don't have contours, which normally happens when you're dealing with a parking lot. You don't want it super steep. You want it relatively flat. What we're going to do there is we're just going to add in spot elevations. And we've already done this before when we were creating our thing. We're going to do the exact same thing. And I'm just going to kind of space these out here. Now there would be a little bit more involved. I'd put them in more primary locations, but I'm more just wanting you to see how this would set up. And so I'm just going to walk this thing up a little bit, and I'll kind of put some here. And let's just walk this 1, 2, 3. And then I'll do the same thing over here. And just kind of walk this around, same sort of way. And so I'm just doing a kind of a decent little spacing. It looks pretty good on my drawing, so I'm just kind of walking around. I would have less if I had this set at a little bit higher scale, because it would be a lot bigger. But let's come in and throw these like so. Let's put one down here. And of course we would have these set up at crucial locations in our design. And I'm going to stagger these a little bit right here. We'd have these in crucial areas in our design because we would need them to make sure that we have this graded the way we want. And so if you looked and you saw a lot of these, that's normally why. So like in this case, I want to know these elevations right here, but I also want to know how high it is up here. Now we'd also be clicking on the curb level where we would be creating our curb. And this is pretty good. And then of course one other thing that we want to add, that we definitely need to add, is we got to know what the elevation of our pad is. And so that is how we would set up our surface. And so that would be some of the primary stuff that we would do. Of course, we'd add in our scale, we'd add in our north arrow and things like that. And then this is kind of the basis. I want to add a few more right here. This is kind of the basis of what we want in our design. And so that is how we would create our general site drawing as far as the grading plan goes and all that. One of the things I want you to note right now, we are not adding in we're not going to add in the cut and fill. I'm going to show you how to do that later on, but we're not going to actually add in the cut and fill total volumes on this one. More time issue problem. And so we'll address that a little bit later, but because you have the surfaces, you can very easily add in the cut and fill based off of it. We'll be doing that at another time. So this is all the steps needed to get from where you set up your reference surface, projected the lines up to it, added the corridor, created the surface, created the final surface, and then the last little bit, like adding in spot elevations, making sure your lines are all showing up that you need in your design, and then leaving out the ones you don't. So if you notice, the ones that I used to create the reference surface aren't on here because those are just distracting in my design, so I didn't add those in. All right, so that's how you create this type of design and to get from the first part of Project Homework 4 to the finish.